Hello everybody, welcome to the Talking Time Let's Play for Final Fantasy XIV, the video companion. I am McDole, and I am here today to talk to you about Second Coil of Bahamut. And by me, I mean I have other people who have actually done this when it was relevant content. And first, I have two guests with me today. First is my raid leader, current raid leader for the current raid tiers, Gare, aka Garelon Sadfurces, who is not appearing in this video. Say hello.
Hello, I'm saying hello this time.
Excellent. And then we have Rhea, who played back during, well, this was current with Gare. So
Yeah, Rhea was actually our raid leader at the time. I was co-lead.
So say hello,
Hello.
Say hello. All right, so we have my husband in booty shorts. We have Alice. We have Satsun Suisse, and I think this is Ran from our raid group.
Yes, that's the initial. That's not his current white mage glamour. I see. It's fine.
Yeah. So, but basically, the whole story is Alice found another way to get into these internment hulks where we're trying to shut down the thing to keep Bahamut from regenerating, which is awesome. And as far as things go, like, this is basically just more trash. I'm not sure why we delayed a little bit. Maybe there was just something going on. I don't know. Maybe I did fix something in audio or something. I don't know. But anyway, we're just going to stab these things with spears and explode them with a lot of magic. And I'm going to do barely any damage. And Ran and my husband Simon are going to destroy everything.
So it's funny because back in the day, you needed what would do you would get one of the tanks to pull all of those golems together, while everyone else, forced the little, crystal dark matter cluster down. So you'd have one tank take the first group, and then the other one would take the second one because you could pop your your invulns if you wanted to, but you didn't usually have to. It was just you wanted to.
Your Hallods and your home gangs and stuff.
Well, I mean, when we did it, we were still doing it as two paladins, because Warrior had already been fixed by this point because it was 2.2, but I think I had only finished leveling it fairly recently, and I wasn't very confident on it. It wasn't until halfway through 2.2 where I switched over to being a warrior. So. But then there's Rafflesia. So what do you remember first about that?
Blighted Bouquet.
I think we're not even going to see that because...
Yeah.
So what was it about?
Oh, well, Blighted Bouquet was essentially the jammer status that you get today, where you could not move, you could not auto attack, you could not use any skills, GCDs or OGCDs, or you just instantly die. The other major thing that T6 brought us was the idea of chains or thorns that had to be broken, which you also didn't see in the video. So you'd have to gather up all in the middle, and then we'd had tanks and healers move north, was it? And then DPS move south, because it was always a tank with a DPS, or tank or healer attached to a DPS. Was that not correct, Rhea?
It depended on the orientation of the thorn, like the bramble AoEs, because the bramble AoEs would be semi-random, and you would just have to break apart depending on that orientation, so that there's enough room for everyone.
And we're seeing that kind of stuff today.
Yeah, I mean, it's very apropos. It's very similar to Eden 9 in some ways.
Yeah.
You had no control over where brambles spawn, but otherwise it's very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's actually a good. You even actually see something in E9S, which you'll see in this. Well, you don't see it in this fight, but it's supposed to be part of T7, which is Petrified Voice. Except, what's it called in 9S now?
Voice and Shriek.
No, I know, but what was the actual attack named? We called them Voice and Shriek, but we call them Voice and Shriek. But do you remember what the actual attack is called in 9S offhand?
Oh, in 9S.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't.
Yeah, but it's basically we just call them Voice and Shriek, and that is how new adventurers today have inherited these terms, much like you hear about Dynamo or Chariot, even though those have again shown up under their original names. But Voice was you had to This petrified voice was a cone, and you would be assigned with this thing, and there was a countdown debuff. And at the end of the countdown, you would, in your immediate in front of you, you would have a big cone, which would petrify anything in the way, including other players. If you want to explain Shriek, because I'm not doing all the talking for you.
So, but before we get into Shriek, yeah, it's the villain from the end of 1.x. Surprise, they're still alive. Kind of, but we're getting ahead of ourselves on that.
Yeah. So if you wanted to explain Shriek, though, because I'm doing all the talking so far.
Yeah, so Shriek is kind of like an unavoidable AoE that hits the whole arena. It originates from one player who has the debuff, and it just petrifies everyone it touches. The only way you can avoid this is if you manage to line of sight the AoE by an ad in the T7 fight. I'm not sure you'll see that in this particular video.
I don't think so.
Pretty sure you're not going to see anything in this video.
But there's plenty of supplemental footage.
Yeah,
showing how it works. You basically have to petrify an ad with the voice that Gare just talked about, and then you had to subsequently line of sight the person with the Shriek debuff and the rest of the party with this ad, and that was the only way to dodge it. And it was a little glitchy.
A little bit, just a tiny bit. It was a bit of a thing. It was a big pain in the ass. The other thing is that the ad that you had to petrify, you also had to lead that ad around for a while. So you'd usually get a bard to do it.
Summoner.
Or
Summoner was better because of the slow you could do.
That's true, but did we have a summoner? So that's
yeah,
why we
Alice.
Alice went summoner, but I know they also went.
I also
bard.
went. Yeah, but they played summoner in T7 explicitly for that reason. And then when I had to do it, I went summoner as well.
Yeah. Because you had to leave that thing around for a while before it could get frozen, and if it hit whoever, it would tether to somebody. You could pick up the tether, so that's what the summoner did, or bard, but summoner was obviously the better way to go. And you had to drag it around for a while because you couldn't petrify it earlier because there was another failsafe, so you can just leave one up, and then if it touched anybody, they just die. Just as if you got petrified, you got hit by anything, no matter how small the damage, you died. There was a lot of just you died in second Coil that doesn't really like. There are times when you see some like instant death mechanics happen again in later raid fights, but not to the extent that you would see in second Coil, especially in T7. T7 was terrible.
Speaking of T7, oh wait, no, this is T6, might be.
No, this is T7.
This is T7.
Is this T7?
Trust me, we remember.
We'll never forget.
Oh wait, yeah. Okay. The numbering scheme, just because they had the jumping puzzle in the middle of first Coil, like it just completely throws me off from the new stuff. You know what I mean?
Yep. They realized that mistake at least and corrected it rather expeditiously. But as you'll see with T7, one of the biggest problems with the fight is the way it does phase changes. So at like, I forget what percentage, but like 70%, you trigger a phase change no matter what's going on with everything else in the arena. And sometimes you could actually push to the point where you have an unwinnable fight because you'll get a Shriek before you have an ad that can sufficiently block it. And so it's one of those cases where the fight got harder with the more gear you got, because you would do more DPS and you'd actually have to hold your DPS in order to not wipe the raid.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to just take a look at the video, if you go to like 2 minutes, McDowell, you can actually see that first ad come out and what we have to do to drag him around. The other thing is that there's all these different ads in T7 that had to be picked up immediately, and Provoke doesn't work as it works now. Provoke now gives you not only top threat compared to anyone else, but it also gives you a flat approximately 2,000 enmity for whatever that means. But it means that it's essentially means it's not going to go off of that tank. So these ads that got, and this is such an important part of the T7 fight, these ads had to be picked up and dragged around. And on a paladin, that was really hard to do. And even a warrior back then had a little bit better of a time, but not much better. So I had to basically prime up my second part of my my threat combo, you know, do fast blade and then wait on savage blade. And I got good enough so that I didn't have to actually wait forever for this ad to show up, pick it up, and then drag it. All the while there's all these voices going out, while there's going to be a shriek, and we had to get these. There's 3 of these ads that had to come down. So it was just an absolute bloody nightmare.
And if you hit the ads with the voices or the shrieks, they got a huge damage up buff.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I see the cursed voice, which is the same thing that you see in E9S nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's called cursed voice, but yeah. So and then, meanwhile, the main tank had it really easy. You just take Melusine up to the top there and just you know, you have to drag her a little bit, but not in comparison to. You can see me in the background just fucking running. And like you can't use sprint then either. I think I might have used sprint on a couple of them because by the time that I picked up the enemy, I'd have some TP back. But like it was just, you can see, so I'm sitting at like 3 minutes 38 seconds. That's the first ad that I'm the Lamia Death Dance, and I'm bringing it right back up to Melusine because it has to come up here so it doesn't get hit by something else, and it can be, you know, AoE down as quickly as possible alongside Melusine.
So
because if you had her down the bottom.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
It's okay, but it's basically it had to come down. It had to get down before we had that shriek or whatever, because. Yeah, and then there's a second ad coming up, and there's this, because I had to drag that ad all the way up there because the second Lamia Death Dancer spawned where that one was, and then I'm moving over to the other side because there's going to be a third one all the way over there.
So let's talk about Avatar.
Okay, well, but T7 is the real. That was the real one of the series, if you know what I mean. But Avatar was pretty simple. I don't actually remember much from it other than the.
Like if you've seen on our video now, you'll see there's like a little AoE marker, and just completely lit up myself and my husband immediately.
So the major mechanic in T8 was the 4 towers, and the 4 towers would basically spawn different mechanics at certain charge rates, and the charge rate was like 15 seconds or so. But if someone ran into the tower, they would basically push a charge immediately. And so the idea was that you would strategically have players enter the towers at different times to trigger the mechanics in a favorable fashion, so that you don't have multiple going off at once. It was a really cool concept, if you ask me, but it certainly led to a lot of interesting failures, because the ordering could get so tight on some of those checks, and sometimes the server wouldn't update your position very quickly. So you could have done the right thing, but just because of the way the server tick went, you were just out of luck.
Yeah, and the other thing was that, like, you don't really ever see another. You never saw another fight like T8. Not like that. Not where you had things like the 4 towers or anything. And definitely not to the extent. I can't even think of another fight that does anything similar. The only thing I'm trying
like
to think
maybe Twizzledinks or whatever his name is in Alexander.
Yes, but yeah, like
that's the puddle part, but it wasn't like you had a lot of freedom in T8 that they didn't give you in any other turn. Like there were a lot of different ways to push these towers and handle the fight completely differently as a result.
You can imagine that. This is a good... So, at this time, we basically were running Coil. There was no party finder. There was no cross-party anything other than Duty Finder, which, of course, you were not doing Coil in. And so we had a sister static. And so we basically developed all of the strategies that that you would ever see in any of the fights with the sister static, because we would have occasionally, you know, on the weekend, get together with them to try and clear a fight so that, you know, we could... because if people couldn't meet up for, you know, the raid till the refresh on Tuesday, we would want to try and get it down, and it was just so whenever someone talks about established strategies for any of the fights in Coil, that really wasn't the case. Like, we did have things like Mr. Happy, like Ether did have certain kind of things that they would do, but it was basically because like Xenosis Vex, Bok Choy McNuggets, or Mr. Happy, or MTQ Capture said, oh, this is the way you're supposed to do things. And it was almost never the way we ever did anything, because we were trying to, you know, accommodate 2 black mages, for one thing, along with just like, you know, we had our own ways of doing things. And so going into like Alexander and beyond was kind of really weird to have like suddenly have all these different pug strats actually be relevant.
Yeah, we'll get to Alexander later. Anyway.
The one other point I'd like to make is that up until the I would say T8, like it was generally recognized that healers like didn't have to DPS, but with T8, if you went with 2 tanks, your healers had to DPS to meet the enrage. It was a much higher DPS check than anything we had seen prior, especially for like your given gear.
Yeah.
We were popping poison potions on T8
oh, wow.
in order to kill it.
And T7, we were doing
T7 we were using it, but not as often. T8 we were using them on cooldown coordinated just to kill the boss. And that was with Gare as the Dragoon. We actually were doing 1 tank in T8 because the extra DPS meant that like we just had that much more cushion, and none of the mechanics really needed a second tank. You could have 1 tank everything.
And that's something that they would definitely go away from.
Yeah,
they didn't want.
So bringing things back to bringing things back to where we are now. We'll have a little bit of time to talk about T9, because there's a lot going on in T9, and you'll see.
Years wrong.
Yeah, what you're seeing on the video right now is absolutely not how you're supposed to do T9. We're just kind of winging it. Like the issue with T9 is it's kind of the old guard's Albatross, in that it has like mechanics that are just insta fail, like regardless of how much health you have, how much you're DPSing, because as you can see, we're very early on in the fight. Nail comes up in here and basically starts the fight invulnerable, and you're just dealing with mechanics. So like you see, we're dropping meteors right there. I drop 1 meteor on top of another, and it's hilarious, and they're going to detonate and kill me.
I have since taught McDowell and Simon how to do meteors correctly.
Ooh.
After a very bad blue party where they wanted to do the fucking Mario Kart / race car thing, which was the dumbest. I still can't believe that was ever an accepted strat, Rhea. It was so bad. The method we came up with was obviously probably more in line with what the developers intended, because those 3 circles. So this part where McDowell's dying, she drops 6 meteors, and so those meteors, even though it doesn't matter because of the DPS involved, you were supposed to feed them to the different golems that would drop. And so the method that we used, that we developed, Rhea developed with Sona, was the 3 circles. We had the 2 tanks, and then a group of healers and 2 DPS, and a group of healers and 2 DPS. And so what you did was that you went out to the very edges to drop your first meteor, and then you would go back to the center, back to your circle, just to see where you would go. If you had to go again, and we did it in like a clockwise fashion to drop them, because they had these very handy little markers on there to show where it was safe.
Almost like the developers intended it to be used that way.
Yeah, whereas the rest of everyone else was like, oh yeah, you just sprint around the outside of the arena, you'll be fine. And it's like, no, any amount of display lag could turn a fight into death. Especially
when all it takes is 1 person to not be sprinting in order to wipe the whole raid. It was ping was a problem. The server ticks positioning were not always consistent back then. They're a lot better now. I mean, I would say in Final Coil it was much improved, but in Second Coil it was still fairly rocky.
And that's still an improvement over like First Coil / Titan hard mode at the very end of the game. If we ever want to have fun, McDowell, we should go into Titan.
Unreal.
Titan Unreal would be a good idea, because that would actually really show you how the fight was. Although they didn't, did they I heard a rumor that they actually replicated the server ticks from back then, but I don't believe that. Must have just been someone making a joke. I can't believe they'd actually do that.
That would not be smart.
It
No.
wouldn't be smart, but it would be very telling. But if you look on the screen right now on McDowell's video, you can see that there's all these different markers on there. So the first, so you see where Assassin's Suisse is now. You'd actually come a little bit further towards the edge of the arena to drop your first meteor. And then you'd go back to your circle, unless you got a second one, and you would drop it between those two markers that McDowell Assassin's Suisse is just like running all over the place. And you guys are going to probably die again, aren't you? How many times did you die to the meteors?
A bunch.
Okay. Yeah, and so then and then you're supposed to drop those. See, when you had those markers over your head, those green ones, that was when it was going to summon the golems. And you guys, I think you're supposed to put them. Yeah, no, you killed each other again. You're supposed to put them in the center of those three circles, the nipples we call them. Put them on the nipples, because we were all, collectively 12 years old in terms of maturity.
And I think he just got his he got his swole on there
because
he ate a meteor.
Yeah. Well, no, he ate another golem. If they eat more than 2 meteors, or they ate another golem, or they got too close to another golem, they turn into the super golem, and then you die.
Yeah, I see.
Yep. Speaking of instant death mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Coil's definitely the king.
The wall is murder, just like in Twintania.
Well, I mean, the wall's murder is usually a thing they put in partially just to let you wipe right away if something is screwed up beyond belief.
Also that, yeah.
So, yeah.
And they didn't do that throughout the whole series, the whole tier. They didn't start doing that until Stormblood, I think. Where you'd have a full.
Had a lot of them.
Well, I mean,
Alex had some of them, but like as a consistent, every turn has death boundaries. No, I think that the coils were the only ones that didn't have that issue.
Time.
Yeah, like they only did it for the capstone, or like the final fight of each tier. Because otherwise, I think that the mechanics were simple enough to where you could recover even if you did mess them up.
Yeah, and it was still. But yeah, so again, the meteors are. This is painful to watch a little bit. It's like, guys, no, you just. So.
We spent how long on these meteors?
We spent an entire weekend. Like,
I mean, the fact you don't. The fact that you don't even get a proximity marker that you get nowadays when something's going to land where you were standing, those kinds of things are super helpful. And so if you're not used to it, and you're just like, wait, this just landed on me, like how come I didn't know it was going to land on me then?
Yeah.
It's just, it was something that would always stick in my mind. It was one of the biggest problems we had when we joint task force this.
Yeah, it was, and that's how we developed, or the reason why we developed that. I also remember very much, I was running Dragoon during that joint task force, and for the fucking life of me, I could not get my heavy thrust off. This is a defunct skill. Originally, it gave a Dragoon like a 15% damage up, but you had to do it on the flank of an enemy, and if they turned around, it didn't count. So I spent like half of the time in there trying just to get the heavy thrust off, let alone trying to kill the stupid golem. You also had to kill the golems in a certain order. You want to get the green one down first, if I remember correctly, because that was the most annoying one.
Green and blue were both annoying, relatively speaking.
There's my husband taking the tank buster to the face.
Oh yes, and the Ghost of Mericidia. So your off tank would take the Ghost of Mericidia, and then you had to kill it. And then, if you got a Garrote debuff, you had to go stand on one of those little tiny circles. Those circles would show up again in E8S, Shiva Savage. And you remember those with the dragon heads? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
How could someone forget? And they work just about as well. Like, accidentally run through it and it happens to trigger. Other times you run and stand on it and it's just not not procking.
So we're just to give you an idea, like imagine those circles on like a brighter version of this floor that you're looking at right now, and that's what we're referring to with E8S. But we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But you can kind of see how with their design philosophy, where they'll take mechanics from older fights and use them in new and interesting ways.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even call it that. It was like they reused the mechanic. It's kind of this basic raid language that I've talked to you about it before, and I've never really had a chance to theorize better. But it feels like what they did with the Coil fights, and then later on, is that they went, you know what? We need to have there are certain mechanics that a player needs to recognize right away, and know what they do. One of those is definitely thorns or chain breaking. Eventually, they finally gave us in Stormblood a universal stack mechanic marker. But things such as knowing to break chains, to pull them away, or to when you needed to space something a certain far away. Or how ads work. There's this kind of this unified raid language that people don't really. They have to learn that first before they really start getting better at the raids. And so I remember very clearly when you guys, you and Ran, and other new people that we had started to learn this raid language, in 011, when you're oh yeah, again, I don't mean to be going so much further ahead, but it's like, oh, this is just like, Panto. And it's like, yes, you guys, this is the language that you finally learned how these different mechanics interact with one another, and it's always really fascinating to see that happen. I mean, I really need to talk. I really need to develop this more to talk about how that works. Because
oh yeah, when we were talking about the 011 mechanic Pantocrator and going into E3S with the nonsense, yeah.
Yep.
Speaking vaguely, just from that, just for funsies.
Also, isn't it crazy, Rio, how everyone has an anti-knockback now, and you don't have to deal with Heaven's Fall like you used to?
Yeah, that is definitely something that I didn't think about right away, but at the same time, I also miss Mana Wall as a black mage.
Oh yeah, real Mana Wall.
Real Mana Wall, the one that let you ignore mechanics that everyone else had to do.
Just like how I remember how you and Smokey would, for T5, which is not in this video, it's in the previous video, you guys would run over the little hill and you just Mana Wall. And then just start sniping down those snakes.
Yep.
Well, that's going to do it for this video, so thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you guys next time when... next time, I believe the next video is going to be Circus Tower, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, and you should call us back for a Final Coil, because...
Absolutely.
There's lots of stories for Final Coil. I mean, you have to promise me you'll include...
Oh yeah, I'll...
crit opener. You have to include that video, because it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Back when 725 DPS was enormous DPS.
Hey, I was up to 1200.
You were up to 1200. Proud. No, you deserve to be proud of that.
Anyway, story for another time. We'll catch you guys later.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Bye.